All right, everybody, I am super excited to show you guys, to introduce you to probably the best build of all my Monteros. This is my 1995 Mitsubishi Montero SR that I call the Hooptero. The reason I call it the Hooptero is because you call a car that's kind of beat down and whatever a hoopty, and this is a Montero, so the Hooptero. Now, I'm gonna do a full build breakdown series on this. I'm gonna go through like all the specs, all of what I did, because I've put a lot of work into this. This is my most trail purpose built rig, and I really like the way it's turned out. But in this video, I just wanna introduce it and talk about how I got this car, why I got this car, and a cool story of like how it came to be. So we're out here, we're doing one of the harder trails in Montana. We're headed up to a camp spot tonight, but let me run you guys through this car and how it came to be. Now, the Gen 2 was the one I was originally shopping for when I was looking for Monteros, because I like the way they look. I like the boxy 90s styling, and I knew that these were super capable off-road because they come with a rear locker and it's solid axle in the rear. And so I knew there were a lot of things to be desired about it, but I couldn't find one that I liked. These really suffer from bad valve stem seals and some other stuff. And so I knew if I was gonna get this, it was gonna be a lot of work. I was gonna have to put a lot of effort into it. And realistically, the Gen 3 was just a better pick for us. So I didn't get one of these, but they always were in the back of my mind that I wanted one of these. I wanted an SR because it's got the locker, because it's got some of the better things for off-roading. And so I was really excited about this. Now I picked this one up, not because I wanted to build it to be an off-road rig, actually. I picked this up because I can't pass up a good deal. And I was running the Gambler 500 2 years ago. Now, if you followed me on Instagram, you know I've run the Gambler 500, and you might have followed me for long enough to know that I brought this when I ran it in 2021. And the reason I brought on the Gambler 500 is because I bought this car running, driving with a clean Montana title for $400. I am not kidding, $400, and I got this car. Now, when I got it, it was in pretty good shape. As far as like the body and the rust and all that, like there isn't any. But mechanically, someone had taken it a little bit apart on the interior, and the bigger one is the guy thought it had a blown head gasket or a crack in the block. He thought the motor was toast. Turns out it wasn't toast. It had a massive oil leak from an oil pump gasket that was just dumping oil. I'm talking like every 10 miles you'd lose a quart of oil. So it wasn't in good shape, but that's how I got this car for $400. I took it, I put a couple $100 into it, and I ran it in the Gambler 500. And when I ran it on the Gambler 500, I was planning on selling it when I got back. So I was beating on the thing, I was thrashing on it, and then I fell in love with it. So I'm gonna get in the car and I'm gonna head up the trail, and I'll tell you more of that story. All right, so like I was saying, I bought this thing with the intention of selling it. I wanted to beat it up. I only had, I think, like $550 into it when I left for the Gambler 500. And if you don't know what that is, look it up on YouTube. It is a super fun thing. But basically, I had to road trip this all the way to Oregon, rally it off-road, and road trip it all the way back. And so during the process, I got to know this car really well. We took it to the sand dunes. I jumped it in the sand dunes. We took it rock crawling. We took it into the salt flats in Bonneville, which you should never do with a car you care about, by the way. It'll just start rusting. I did end up cleaning it really good with a pressure washer, getting all this stuff off, so like it's good. But like I had no intention of keeping this car, so I was beating the tar out of it. And I just thought, if it breaks, it breaks. I've only got $500 into it. And what ended up happening, as you'd imagine, is on the way back, I just started falling in love with it. I realized how incredibly capable it was with a locker and how much flex it had. I broke the sway bars on that trip, so like it was just flexing all over the place. And I just realized like, man, this is a really good car. What ended up pushing me over the edge is I met a guy in Oregon called Sean. He goes by Oregon Monty on Instagram. This is why the Montero community is so great. He hooked us up with a transmission that we blew one up on our road trip. He hooked us up with one for free and helped me out. And when I was at his shop, he had a Montero just like this one. I think it was a 96 SR and a 2-inch body lift on it. And he was running 35s without any other modifications. And I took one look at that thing and I thought, I've got to have this in my life. Like it was just massive and it looked so capable, and he hadn't done anything. He had spent like $150 and he could fit 35s, like no problem, no issues. And so I was like, I got to figure out how to do this. By the time I sell it and whatever and put the money into the Gen 3 to get a locker, like I'll be just as well if I just start from this platform. And so I decided by the time I got home, I got to figure out how to keep it. So what I ended up doing is I gave the Gen 3 to my wife as a daily driver. The Gen 1 is always our fun date car, and this became my daily driver. And so after all that, I put a bunch of time into it, and this one is purpose built. So when I built this, I wanted to make a no compromise rig to say, I want this to go off-road, I want it to go anywhere, I want to have all the things, gears, lockers, all the armor, I want it to just crawl up a wall. And so that's what it does. And I put up with all the other things that it doesn't do well as a daily driver. So I drive this every single day. I'm not afraid to take it out and beat on it. But that's kind of the story of how this rig came to be what it is. After having the Gen 3 and having a really capable car, I knew I wanted to take it to the next level and have something where I basically built this to say, no bypasses. If there's a bypass, I'm not taking it. I want to go up the hard route. I want to at least give it a shot. So anyways, now we're going to keep making our way up the trail. I'll see you at camp, and we'll talk about the rest of the build. All right, so we made it to camp, and now I want to talk about two things that I think really make up the story of how this car came to be. So I mentioned when I bought it, it had a massive oil leak, and it was just gushing oil, and the guy thought the motor was blown. So I went in and I repaired that, and it was a lot of labor, but it wasn't that much money. That's how I was able to get it up and running for the Gambler 500 for almost 500 bucks. But that wasn't the end of my issues. I mentioned before that all these Gen 2s really suffer from valve stem seals, and this one was no different. So even though I repaired the oil leak, it was burning about a quart of oil every gas tank. So that's a lot of oil, and I just put up with it. It was my plan to eventually tear into the motor, replace the valve stem seals. However, one day in January, I was out, I was hanging out, I was having a good time snowmobiling with my friends, and I forgot to check the oil. I was doing donuts at Redline, spinning around, and I started to hear a really loud knock. Sure enough, I spun a rod bearing. Piston number one totally dismantled itself and had all of its bearing material scattered throughout the motor. And so this motor was toast. And so I went from having this really cheap car that I was having a good time with to now needing a full engine rebuild. And these are not easy to find parts for. This has the 3.5 dual overhead cam, and it only came in 3 years, 94, 95, and 96. And it shares some parts, but altogether I needed the whole motor. And so I was searching and searching. I ended up buying a whole parts car and rebuilding this motor from the block up. So I had the crank disassembled. I put all new bearings, all new wear items, all new everything, all new valve stem seals in it, and completely rebuilt this motor. Now I'd done a couple dirt bike motors and some snowmobile motors, but never something as extensive as a full engine rebuild. And so that was super fun to do. And now it doesn't leak a drop of oil. So it's a super reliable vehicle. I've ended up touching almost everything on this car since then, but it's been really good to me. I've really enjoyed the process, and that's kind of the story of how this car came to be. So it's been a wild ride. It's been a journey. I got it for cheap. I've done a lot of work to it, and I want to show you guys this whole build in the next video. I'm going to do a full build breakdown of all the work that's gone into it, and there's a lot. So stay tuned for that. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this intro to what I call my Hooptero, the 95 SR.